Imagine you are an artist. A blank canvas stands before you. At the ready is the brush with which you will make your first small stroke. An impulse swells within, an impulse to express something that cannot be put into words, a part of you so deep it can only be rendered on a canvas. You do not need to create, and you do not need to prove. It is the urge to communicate, to share, something that you, as an artist, intrinsically possess. Now imagine God. The artist is God, and the canvas is the universe. His masterpiece, man. The biblical story of creation describes a God full of love and excess, who forms the first man in his own image and likeness. He doesn't do this because it's a mere divine caprice, but out of compassion and fraternity. He wants to share with creatures who can love, think, and create, to participate in his nature. Just as an artist inscribes his signature on each of his works, so God stamped us with his image. We are the creatures who share with God the property of being created in his image, and in this way are distinguished from all other animals. The narrative of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden was precisely intended to echo that divine intention. Not only did God create the man and the woman, but he went out and walked with them and talked with them and entered into relationship with them based on mutual love and trust. Here was the first charged metaphor of communion between creator and creature, the first glimpse of the great desire of God to enter into this kind of relationship with us. And while, as with any good story, there are elements of conflict, when the first humans, Adam and Eve, disobeyed, that first covenant was broken. A breach opened up and a distance between God and man. As a musician might still rework a damaged painting, so God began a program of restoration and redemption for humanity. This story of restoration and redemption is woven throughout the Bible, culminating in the coming of Jesus Christ, the exact image of the unseen God, to restore that image marred by the fall. You are looking at your own reflection in a mirror, but is that all? What is it that you see, merely an exact facsimile or something more? When the Bible says that we were created in the image and likeness of God, it is most definitely saying something more. Not simply an exact copy of God, nor even a passing physical resemblance. Rather, it is the God-given power to reflect aspects of God's nature, God's ability to love, God's capacity and inclination to make moral choices, God's power and ingenuity to create, and ultimately God's way of relating to each other and to the rest of creation, mirroring the divine relationship. It began even before the first human was formed, when God decided to create mankind in his image. From the beginning, this creative act was an invitation to intimacy. God is, by definition, relational. Indeed, he is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in perfect communion. When he created us in his image, he invited us to communion, to a loving relationship with him and with others, to live in a way that reflects that love. This is an image of God that, though sullied by the fall, has never completely disappeared. It remains a work of art that has faded, but under whose shadows we can still glimpse the radiant original. When we love with a pure heart, when we pursue justice, mercy, and the making of great and beautiful things, we stand in that flickering light. Contemplate this not as an abstract truth, but as a living reality that may or may not be present in your life to some extent, or perhaps as part of a different story. Have you ever had a powerful sense of being exactly where you are supposed to be? A moment of deep contact with another person, an experience of beauty bordering on the sublime, in art or in nature, an act of pure, generous love. In these moments, you are standing, for a few fleeting seconds or for much longer, in the image of God. However, if we are being honest, we also understand that we do not always live up to that reality. We fail sometimes to know and to love. We are caught up in selfishness, fear, or apathy, and our reflection in that moment is not pretty. The good news is, God does not leave us there. Like a restorer of art, he is unendingly ready to clean, repair, and restore the image of God in us. We are always offered through Jesus to be made new, so that we might again, as his living image, reflect God's own beauty. Thus I ask you today, brothers and sisters, to reflect. In what way are you today living more in the image and likeness of God? Is there a spot or a blemish where you need the Master to paint or touch you, to wipe the dirt away, to restore you to your original beauty? For you too are a work of art. You were created in love, created for relationship with God, with each other, to be the image and likeness of the one who made you. May we all live more and more in the image and likeness of the one who made us today. Visualize yourself as the caretaker of a garden with myriad trees, everyone distinct and lovelier than the next. It is a garden of Eden, created for a purpose higher than itself, no matter how lofty that purpose might be. Picture the garden as yours to keep and cultivate and keep it flourishing. It is a gift from a generous Father. All that you need is to see it and tend to it, so that it may strive and prosper according to God's will. Now that is what the human rule over creation is all about. It is a special mission assigned to us as the image bearers of God. However, we manifest this dominion in our daily lives, caring for a pet, recycling to protect the environment, growing some herbs in a windowsill. We're responding to God's call to be stewards of this beautiful but fragile world, and in so doing, we are correspondingly called to nurture a closer relationship with our Creator. Knowing, loving, worshiping, and serving God forms the very basis of our relationship with Him. We show God reverence in our stewardship of creation and recognize His sovereign lordship when we remember Him in our provision and cultivation, and sing His generosity in our enjoyment of His gifted goodness to us. Often, it is in the act of curating creation that we realize God's majesty, that we are bound up in one another, that we are all parts of one whole together, tied together by the fabric of life itself. Now I invite you to consider those moments when you felt a Teilhardian sense of connection, not to God, but to everything He has created. Perhaps it was staring at a beautiful sunset, feeling the breeze on your face, or observing an animal playing. But in such moments, we remember that we are part of the world, and that we are a part of it. How many of us have experienced anguish when we've noticed a corner of this garden fading, or when we've seen parts of it trampled upon, devastated by fire, or disfigured by shoddy construction? And how many of us have, at least at times and perhaps in some small measure, felt incapable of doing any more? Every gesture counts, every choice made to care for creation. More responsibly is a gesture in the same direction. Together, we can better reflect the image of God in the world, not only as isolated individuals but also as a unified human family, animated by a common purpose and directed toward a common goal. So let me tell you, as I'm constantly being reminded, something that is more humbling to the ego than any form of secular humility, but which is also more liberating than any secular liberation movement. The great forgotten truth is that God, Yahweh, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, doesn't need us. We forget this because in one sense the opposite is true. It is precisely because He doesn't need us that He loves us. But it is also the only genuinely liberating form that this love can take, because without us, He would still be complete. As that other Father Almighty, St. Augustine of Hippo, put it in the 5th century, or to put it in language more familiar today, for God, creation does not issue from need, but from the overflow of sovereign love. If we manage to keep this truth before the mind's eye, particularly as we explore the manifold implications of our new relationship with creation, it will point the way to seeing our lives as wholly new. To say that God does not need us at first glance might appear somewhat depressing. Indeed, within the structure of the human spirit there. Perhaps to realize this, as almost instinctively one is still surprised and even taken aback. But no, this revelation is far from removing from beings that are made in God's image and likeness an important dimension of their dignity as persons. Such is the very elevation of the sense of the existence of those who were created freely and loved freely by an absolutely self-sufficient, unchanging, and sovereign God. Vulnerability to acknowledge the truth of this love can turn our faith on its head. We begin to see that by grace we are not loved because we are good or earn God's favor through the things we do, but rather we are loved because He so wills it. When we recognize that we are loved this way, just because of who God is, theological constraints are lifted, and we are free to experience the Creator in a way that is more real and intimate. We no longer see the challenge of life as a matter of striving to earn God's love. Now we stop trying and start enjoying Him instead. There have been times in the course of my own life when I have cried out, "Lord, why me? Why would a self-sufficient, all-powerful God care about you and me?" And the answer I've discovered is to be found in the silence of my own loneliness, and in the beauty of God's world, and in the cross of Christ. God didn't need you or me, and yet He loved us, and loved us so much that He stooped to become a helpless, suffering man and die for you and me. It is an infinite vulnerability, the very vulnerability of God-made man, the impetus for His becoming incarnate in Jesus, the only plausible reason He did so. God rendered Himself as vulnerable, present, accessible, so that we could know the fullness of a love that does not demand its own way. Rather, it is a love that is poured out freely. Life is like a spiritual pilgrimage, each step a step closer or a step farther from the path, or more accurately, the destination, the fulfillment found in a good heart. And this destination is not arrived at through the milestones, or the accoutrements, or the external measures of what is called here success, but through the inner transformation that reflects the values of the kingdom. In all the hubbub of striving for daily feedback, we forget the call to inner metamorphosis. No superficial victories are sufficient for a soul looking for a relationship with the divine, for peace and meaning, located only on the path of the purified heart. This search for purity and integrity is reflected in the lives of so many biblical characters, who, despite all the poor choices and disappointments they made, were people who kept reaching toward God with their whole hearts, even though a man after God's own heart still messes up greatly. But it was David's return to God with a sincere heart that defined his spiritual journey. And now, I ask you to look at your own path. Are you on the road to purity of heart? Or have you taken a sidetrack somewhere, preoccupied with the passions and illusions of the world? This is a challenge, an invitation to make a deliberate choice to take the most crucial trip of your life. It's a trip you don't have to make alone. God is ready and willing to be your companion on this journey, guiding, comforting, and changing you inside and out, until the joy and peace that are found in a living, breathing relationship with Him become yours to enjoy. The human odyssey, that ultimate summons of mutation, is the most exciting adventure there is, most arduous yet best rewarded. May you find courage to answer the call, seeking on this and each succeeding day a pure heart, that highest life of God we all long for. This is a story that reveals the scandal of our very humanity and the intimacy with which God desires to love each of us. It traffics in terms that highlight the centrality of the spiritual life, the pursuit of purity of heart that reflects the character of the divine being, and portrays the call to this life not as a solitary vision quest, but as a communal adventure, shared between a creator hungry to interact with his creation and fully re-engaged in a dialogue with his estranged children. His yearning to love brings to the forefront the notion that life has become a piece of gallery art in progress, poured by the hands of our Father, whose goal is to reflect His image more visibly in the culture at large. God bless you.